Good morning. I'm going to start with a very simple thought. Social media is everywhere. This shouldn't be news to any of you. We're all on Facebook, we're on Twitter. We share everything over the internet. We SMS, we make phone calls. And the way we use this technology is changing the way we interact with one another. And it's also changing the way we use things and our needs of those things. But most interestingly enough, it's changing the way we use platforms. And I want to talk a little bit to something that Farida said earlier, and she was talking about framing the problem. And I think that's very, very important. There are so many things that we can do out there that if we don't have a framework by which we look at what's going on and what we're trying to do, we cannot make a good decision. And so looking back to how this connects with social media and all of the information that we're sharing, there's a lot of information out there. There is so much mining that can be done of the information that I share, the trends that I have, that we really need to take a good look at it closely and decide what it is that our problem might be. So Twitter is a very interesting example of this. And today we're following a hashtag, and I'm going to talk a little bit about that. Twitter was designed to facilitate discussions with people. And it's done an incredible job of that. We can talk about the latest musician or what's going on with politics. We can organize protests. We can know what's going on before newscasters know. When Michael Jackson died, that was on Twitter. Newspapers didn't know that. TV didn't know that. Twitter knew. The invention of the hashtag was something that did not exist for the first 2.5 years of Twitter. It was something that people started doing. A man tweeted, "What do you think about using the pound sign to indicate groups, things that we're talking about?" And later that year, local news reporters started to use the hashtag San Diego fires, and that was the first common use of a hashtag. But you know, this caught on with people. They used it all the time. But there was no way to follow the hashtag. It took 2 more years for Twitter to implement that feature, where I could click on it, where it was a hyperlink, and I could follow a topic. And this is an example of a behavior that people have in their use of a system, but the way the company was looking at it, they weren't thinking about, well, we built this, and people are using it not quite how we intended, and we're not sure we want that. You know, they had to think about it for a little while. And it's by observing people's behaviors, which we do every day, and really trying to glean from all of this information that we're sharing, that we can start to develop new habits and new trends. This is one of the photos that was associated with the San Diego fire. Desire paths. You guys are probably familiar with this in some way. It's the notion that as I walk through the park, through the university, down the road, there's a sidewalk, and then there's the shortcut that I take. There's that path off to the side that leads me naturally between my current location and my destination. And these are things that we don't necessarily think about too much, but they're not planned. The architects, the landscape designers, they made a decision. They said, the buildings are here, the bushes are here, and people will walk here, and the cars will drive over here. And then the people came into the picture, and they did something else. Now, sometimes they try and stop us. It doesn't always work. People find a way around. And there's a really nice story about a university campus where they did a huge urban remodel. They put in new buildings, they put in new trees, new bushes, but you know what? They didn't put in the pavers. And school was starting, and the director of the campus comes up and he says to the architect, I noticed we're missing something. What's going on with the sidewalks? When are those coming? We need those in. Students are going to come and they're going to ruin my new grass. They're going to make mud. They will track it into the buildings. And she said, let's wait a little while. Let's wait till this winter. Why would you do that? There'll be snow, there will be mud, there will be sand, it's going to be a mess, everything is going to die. And she said, I want to wait. And the snow came, and these paths started to emerge. And she turned to the director and she said, right there, and right there, and right here. This is where we're going to pave. And that was the natural way that people walked around campus. So there's a lot that we can learn from the behavior of people, the things that they do in everyday life. There is There is a term in China, which I will botch because I do not speak Chinese. It's called tuangu, and it literally means group buying, the act of group buying. And this is a notion that existed in our world, in the thing that we do every day. People would get together and they would say, I need a new dishwasher. Do you know somebody who needs a new dishwasher? And we would get together, a group of people, 10, 15, 20 people, and we'd go. We'd say, all right, Thursday at noon, we're all going to go down to the local store. We're going to get a good deal. And those 30 people would show up, and they would bargain for a good deal. And that's awesome. You get your dishwasher 30% off retail. The seller, he makes a lot of money that day. He sells things he wasn't sure he was going to get out of his merchandise. But it's really challenging for people to go find 29, 30 other people that have the exact same need, and you have to coordinate your time with. Plan for 30 people to all show up at one place. Make sure we all have the right amount of money. Well, a couple years ago, a few different organizations noticed this, thought about it, and they came up with what we know today as Groupon or Living Social or Amazon Local. And it's the ability for me to go online to see something that's nearby me, that's convenient to me, things that are important to me, and say, well, I could get a good deal out of this, but I don't need to know those other 30 people. It's connected me through other social networks, through the internet, just to allow me to make that decision independently and not coordinate with all those other people. So we've taken a behavior that people do in their everyday lives, and we've translated it into a service. Moving on to something that is a little bit older. Back in the 60s, 70s, before the personal computer, everyone wrote in DOS. This is obviously not that, but people had to know exactly the right lines of code to use personal computers. And there was a huge barrier for us to understand, how does this thing apply to my life? I have a desk, I have a manila folder, I write on paper, I file these papers, I put them in a filing cabinet. When I'm done, I throw them in the garbage can. So what is this box over here? What am I supposed to be doing? So we came up with the idea of relating this device with an actual physical item in my real world. We got a graphical user interface. There was a garbage can. There were manila folders. There were files. It made sense. I could relate. This made sense to me in my everyday life. And people became familiar with the system, and it became more complex. And we ended up with a few different things. We found ourselves running into lots of nested menus. Things got really complicated. There were so many different applications in there that I just had to just dig to find what I needed, what was important to me. Desktops got cluttered. And we kept going down this road of trying to make things relate to the real world. We made wall clocks. I took a physical item, a wall clock, and I put it on a screen, on a digital device. Did that make sense? Well, sort of, yeah, it was neat. We made bookshelves. We stitched leather binding into our surfaces on a screen. And this stopped being relevant at some point in time. It's great, it's beautiful. I love knowing that this reminds me of that old desk calendar that I used to have, and it's great. But do I need that reference anymore? Because I understand a personal computer now. I understand the digital world. So at what point do we take the current behavior or evolve from the thing that we needed to do 30 years ago, 20 years ago, and say, okay, let's move on. Let's find something new. It's time to move forward, to understand that people's current behaviors are not necessarily relevant to things that we reference from many years ago. So the next step, or a step that has been taken, is to strip away all of this inauthentic representation of the real world. And you have this idea that, yeah, it's a computer. Yeah, it's software. So I'm not going to pretend to be something else. But you know what's important? I'm important. My content is important. My contacts are important. The people that I talk to, they're the ones that matter. So the notion of Windows 8 is this idea that I'm stripping away everything that doesn't really relate to me, to my contact, to my objects. And I can go to my People Hub. I can see, well, I have my friend Stina, and I want to get in touch with her. I don't have to say, well, should I send her an email? I'm going to go to my email, start writing. Or do I send her an SMS? Or maybe Facebook. I should probably write her on Facebook. Yeah, I think that's the way I'm going to do it. I go to People, and I see Stina, and I have every single conversation I've had with her there, because that's what matters. And I can take this with me. This is the same thing. It's everywhere. It's in my phone. I can actually open up my office documents, things that I have worked on at work, and I go home and I log into my computer and I can see that it's about me. I can still see the file that I was working on in a different building, in a different city, in a different country. It's available to me there. So it's the notion of taking what we used to do, this old behavior of working on a desk, and things that were always tied to a physical object. We're moving forward and we're saying it's not about that anymore, because people get that, but we're on the go when we're sharing. And it's taking that with us and making our devices about us. So there are lots of changes going on, tons and tons of changes. And yeah, my social life is everywhere and technology is everywhere. But what exactly does that mean? Not much, really, in the grand scheme of things. I mean, the wheel was invented over 5,000 years ago. Post office, telephone. But, you know, our public adoption of the internet's been around for 20 years. It's not that long. All of these things that are changing our lives every day, it's just a drop in the bucket. It is a small moment in time. Technology, as we know it today, will not be the same in 20 years. So while we can look at what we're doing and we can try and understand people's needs, it's most important to look at the way they're behaving and to understand what they're sharing and to see, is what we're creating, is the context in which people are using things, does it make sense? Or are they trying to tell us something else? Is there something that they're trying to do? Can I frame the problem differently to help them be more creative and innovate and come up with new ideas and ways to use this. So, when you look at the really big picture, it's beautiful, it's breathtaking. But sometimes it's difficult to know what it is that we need to do. Am I driving down this road? Am I going to go climb the mountain? Are there cows in the pasture? We need to help frame what's going on, help people focus in on things so that we have an idea what's important. And within that context, I can make a decision. I can start to think about what the possibilities are in that space. So that we have a place to begin. Thank you.